Part 26. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 251. Shen Xian pointed at the big fortress. Shen Xian thought of the great fortress after careful consideration, not just random thoughts. Some players may have thought about it, but they would never dare to continue thinking about it. This is human nature. But because of the wealth of the fortress and the situation of the fortress, it would be an excellent idea to attack again. The current owner of the big fortress is Hamad. As long as it is reasonable, then this reasonable or sophisticated dwarf is best to speak. As for the wealth stored in it, it is like a hen that can lay golden eggs. After a period of time, there are more accumulated. In fact, Shen Xian's main purpose in attacking the big fortress was for 2 points. First, loot more supplies from the Council of Skills. Historically, the rise of any powerful country is not based on bloody plunder of other countries, or it may be selfish, but they must do so. Second, lure the main force of the Great Maurya dynasty. Artificially creating an opportunity for the north and the Great Fortress to unite, diverting their attention to the Great Fortress, giving them the possibility to take advantage of the situation. Ashoka's shrewdness would not have failed to see the problem, and he might have taken advantage of it, but he was hindered by the NPC. However, the dwarves have never been afraid of death. Once the NPCs enter the stronghold and cannot eliminate them in a short time, they will face a protracted and hard battle as the negative effects of low morale caused by Agron's death weaken. However, since the Lord said so, players have to consider the feasibility. After thinking about it for a while, everyone came up with the result. The 3 heads of Zushan unconditionally approved Shen Xian. The remaining Bitpig and Devil Makery said, although I think the Lord's proposal is more risky, we think it makes sense to implement it. Shen Xian pointed at the map. Let me explain the key points. The first requires time to accumulate, and the second requires the loss of troops. We must give a certain sweetness to the coalition forces of the Great Maurya dynasty and the dwarves on the frontal battlefield, which will reduce the strength of our troops. It is not enough to shift the target to other places. On the other hand, we must turn around the army and sneak it back when the time is right to win in one battle. The players seem to understand, that is to say, they need to withdraw from the consumption of the Great Maurya dynasty and do some other things. They will not start counterattack until the opponent completes the recapture. After waking up, Devil Makery said, demons have always been the profession we use as cannon fodder on the frontal battlefield. If we do this, we will need to abandon more than 20,000 demons. That's what I say, but doing so will inevitably arouse suspicion. In a war, how can all demons die and none of the wizards die? When it came time to make a decision, several players looked hesitant, feeling that not giving the Maurya dynasty a certain victory would not win their bait, but they couldn't bear to sacrifice the army they had worked so hard to cultivate. You must know that they are living NPCs, who also have emotions, angers, sorrows and joys. They cannot be treated as a bunch of data that can be manipulated at will. In the army, sacrificing local interests for overall victory is estimated to be understood by every senior officer. It is cruel to individuals, but inevitable for the overall situation. Or sacrifice the players. At least they can be resurrected. Or, we must not let our soldiers sacrifice in vain. The players looked sad. After thinking about it seriously, they all nodded. After a while, the discussion was completed and the next strategic goals were determined. Zushan and Cry are responsible for the frontal battlefield, while Shen Xian and White Isle are responsible for surrounding harassment. Bitpig contacted Goldfinger to negotiate with Hamad, and Shen Xian returned to the place where the army was stationed in Twilight Town. 3 elite teams from Twilight Town were mobilized here, including the Hand of Ursuline, the Guardians, and the Bloody Cross. Our next step is to attack the Warhammer Fortress in the northeast. Shen Xian announced their goal. Warhammer Fortress? It is estimated to be a 17-hour journey. Miss Yao studied the map, but there is no benefit in attacking there. It's just that there's no benefit, so we attack. Besides, I have a shortcut to take. It only takes 10 hours. Even Miss Yao didn't know about the advantages of Shen Xian's map, so Miss Yao was stunned after hearing this and could only request updates from his map. After a while, a secret dark passage appeared on the map. Through this, they direct access to Warhammer Fortress. Warhammer Fortress is a medium-sized fortress controlled by Taboo, a small American guild. It has an army of 10,000. There is no problem in terms of difficulty. The only thing is that it takes some time. Okay, that's it, a 10-hour march, capture, and attract the attention of the Great Maurya dynasty. Keep a low profile, otherwise it will only make them suspicious. Miss Yao held her chin and muttered. She didn't know when she had an extremely thorough grasp of the game. Because games have never been divorced from reality, many of the so-called economic theories, military tactics, and political conspiracies can be used in the game. Realized in. However, she had her own ideas after living a different life since she was a child. If she lived an ordinary life like an ordinary girl, raising a husband and raising children, that would definitely not be her character. Some people say that emperors often envy common people when they are born. It is undeniable that there are also many people who like to live such a wonderful life. Chen Xian Miss Yao suddenly called out. Shen Xian turned around and stared at Miss Yao and asked, Miss Yao, do you have something? No. Miss Yao quickly turned around, can I ask you something? Are you planning to stay at Kangdu Bank? Why not? Shen Xian asked hurriedly. But you are obviously not simple. I always feel that you make me very unhappy. So, what should I do? Start a company? Invest in money? Miss Yao, what I'm good at is games. Shen Xian said it clearly at once. Miss Yao blushed and felt that it made sense, but somehow she always didn't want to see such a situation. As she thought about it, she felt that there was a knot in her heart that she couldn't untie. In a few days, when the WTP rankings come out, I want to open a studio affiliated to the Lock Consortium. You know, Tujukan is more suitable for fighting after all. The management needs to be managed by people who have learned professional knowledge. College students have just graduated. Blank, no spies will appear, it would be more appropriate to recruit them, can you come over and help me? Shen Xian shrugged nonchalantly and said, no need, Miss Yao. I occasionally go to Fatboy and Kwangmo studios just to play with them. Besides, you are not my direct boss after all, are you? Shen Xian declined politely. He knew that troubles would always occur during the WTP rankings every year. People can't help themselves in the world. As a member of the sect, he had to solve them with his own hands. Therefore, Miss Yao needs to rely on herself after all. The second man Miss Yao admired in the world was Shen Xian. Unable to defeat him, the two had no choice but to call Tujukan to prepare for the army. Online game DungeonMaster. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 252. On December 18, the army of Dusktown began to slowly advance towards the Warhammer fortress in the northeast. Along the way, they needed to cross several secret dark passages and mountain canyons to finally reach their destination. On the night of December 18, an army of about 14,000 people appeared near the Warhammer fortress. The world mission did not arouse the vigilance of the Taboo Guild. On the contrary, they thought that they would never be attacked due to their remote geographical location. The president of the Taboo Guild, Abhorrent, led a mixed team of 4,000 players and NPCs from the territory to the tidal ruins adjacent to the fortress for leveling. The tidal ruins, a place discovered by Abhorrent for leveling up for level 50 players, is inhabited by countless monsters, and even powerful creatures above level 100 can be found. For Taboo, whose average level is less than level 25, it is a unique leveling holy place. Taboo Guild is a casual guild, without a perfect guild management system and stable guild activity funds. The president is a player ranked 100,000 in WTP and is not strong in the United States. Although Shen Xian investigated the enemy's strength, he did not underestimate the enemy because of its weakness. When he arrived at the Warhammer Fortress, he immediately launched a reconnaissance. He heard that there were less than 6,000 troops left inside the Warhammer Fortress. While adjusting tactics, he prepared to capture the fortress before the opponent returned. He arranged the most classic formation, the vanguard of the demon army, with the Mad Demon, Horned Demon, and Inferior Demon as the main force, the Baiter Demon as the leader, the Fire Demon and Wizard on the flanks, the Guardian in the middle, and the Bloody Cross as the rear. When the dense demon army appeared under the fortress, the players left behind in the Warhammer Fortress were stunned. What's going on? Did the Abyss invade? Where did they come from? There's nothing to plunder in our fortress. Are they crazy? The player called out helplessly, contacting the president while closing the city gate. However, Shen Xian sent out the player with the Bloody Cross to investigate in advance, and learned that Abhorrent would return in at least an hour, so he was at ease in the battle. With a gate with 50,000 health points and a wall with 20,000 health points, the fortress built by the dwarves was extremely solid. On the wall, the sparse players threw boulders and crossbows, but due to the lack of manpower, the damage caused was far from suppressing the attack. And the demon army they faced was tens of thousands, so it is conceivable that there was almost no loss. In 20 minutes, the Warhammer fortress fell into the hands of Dusktown. Then, the underground army that captured the fortress carried out a rapid cleansing of the resistance forces in the fortress, and eliminated nearly 1,000 players in a short half-hour. Abhorrent, who had just received the news, was furious and rushed back with his men, cursing in English without any manners. Where did these Chinese players come from? He didn't care whether they could recapture the fortress. Warhammer Fortress is not rich, and Abhorrent couldn't think of the reason why the underground forces took a fancy to it. He just felt that he was unlucky and would be remembered by the underground forces. Abhorrent, who was anxious, didn't wait for the players who died in the fortress to be reborn, and he hurriedly launched a siege as soon as he arrived at the fortress. Thousands of dwarves and humans lined up in a dense square and rushed into the fortress desperately. Sometimes the enthusiasm of players in casual guilds is easy to mobilize. They don't care about interests and may fight desperately because of a passionate battle, but their fighting power can never be compared with professional players. Although they were in high spirits, they could only become the objects of slaughter when facing a group of vicious demons. As a result, they were all swallowed by the demons in less than 10 minutes. Not only were they completely wiped out, but the army of Dusktown was also upgraded by an average of 1 level. By the next morning, Dusktown had completely controlled the Warhammer fortress and seized 2 million gold from it. At the same time, Ashoka discovered that the underground forces that should have appeared frequently in the north were nowhere to be seen, and only a few battles were fought. The effective Snow Eagle tactics were gradually losing their effectiveness. It was not until the Warhammer fortress was captured that he realized that the underground forces had already touched their rear. Combining the clues obtained from various aspects, at least half of the underground forces bypassed them and wanted to harass other places. Ashoka did not object to this approach, because the underground forces were not harassing his forces, and it would be good to let those players who ignored the overall situation and only knew how to protect themselves suffer a little. But he was more capable than the average dandy. He did not gloat over the abnormal situation, but was cautious and did not want to fall into the trap of the underground forces. According to the current trend of the underground forces, they can definitely regain control of the fortress, but does the underground force have any unexpected conspiracy? He knew that the talents of the Great Maurya dynasty were not as good as those of the underground forces. He understood that there was neither a PK king who could dominate the world nor a master of strategy in the guild, so he could only rely on the saying that there is strength in numbers. When Ashoka received the news that several players' territories around them were looted, he discussed with several senior NPCs. "Hamath welcomes us back to the fortress," the leader of the Snow Eagle Knights said loudly. "There are legions of the Demon Buddha and Bitpig between us, with a number of about 50,000. I believe we can take them down in the next few days." The dwarves were full of confidence. They never thought that the underground forces could defeat them on the front battlefield. The reason why the fortress was lost was nothing more than some boring conspiracy. The dwarves could resolve the crisis by uniting. The leader of the Fearless Legion volunteered, "This time it's our turn to be fearless. I want those evil dungeon masters to taste the anger of the dwarves." Ashoka was a little worried that the pure dwarves would fall into traps, and hurriedly said, "We must act in coordination." The dwarf leader did not object, but felt that some of his abilities were ignored, and his face was a little unhappy. "You know, it was the Snow Eagle Knights who played a role in the past few days. It is not surprising that the proud dwarf leader had such an idea. Because it was just a resistance, the battle with the Great Maurya dynasty became the best opportunity to test the command level of the guild players." Zushan and Krai sent several potential players respectively, hoping that after several battles they can grow up and become independent figures in the guild. The three bosses and Devil Makri led their elite troops to dig for treasures. There was no doubt about the authenticity of the treasures. After opening them, tens of millions of gold would have a significant impact on the growth of the guild. In the next few days, the Great Maurya dynasty, which was indeed sure that the underground forces were moving their strategic core, was unstoppable. They broke through several lines of defense of the underground forces one after another, and finally achieved a reunion with the great fortress. The technical council was about to become more chaotic. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Buledin Lau Buledin Si Buledin Me. Chapter 253. After the reunion, the dwarves' garrison in the great fortress reached 140,000. Counting the 100,000 border troops, after the previous wars, the NPCs' losses were not that great. Ashoka brought Iker, the heir of the Hamd clan, to the great fortress for the first time, secretly investigating and preparing to complete the one-time task of uncovering the truth. At the same time, he overcame all objections and let the players and troops of the territory go inside the city to build a defense line, ready to deal with unpredictable underground forces at any time. It must be said that his move was very clever. Hamath could not refuse his proposal and could only let Ashoka turn the Art Council into a well-guarded military fortress. The city is full of checkpoints set up by players, wooden fences, rock fortresses, all temporary buildings built on ruins, which will effectively resist the attack of the army and fight a protracted street battle. Moreover, he looked for a rune priest to repair the defense barrier under the fortress. Even if the underground forces wanted to break through, they had to destroy the defense barrier first. This time, Ashoka would definitely keep an eye on Hamath and not give him the opportunity to do anything secretly. The fortress seemed to have become an iron wall and indestructible. Just as the world players were paying attention to the world mission, the first player with a 5th stage territory appeared in the Broken Continent. The Broken Continent is a world adjacent to the Night Star continent. Orcs and trolls live everywhere. This is a barren land. Powerful monsters are rampant everywhere. The dangerous forbidden lands of the ancient gods are left everywhere on the earth. Compared with the Night Star continent, which is closer to the fantasy world, the Broken Continent is a primitive world where players enjoy the war of blood and fire. It is conceivable that before the WTP ranking is announced, players hope to make some achievements to make their rankings rise. Some players, even if they are low-key, can hardly escape the pursuit of the gate. Except for a few national forces and secret organizations, it is basically impossible to get rid of the gate. Shen Qian did not make any significant contributions in the past few days. He captured several towns and surrounded several armies. Apart from that, it was almost all Miss Yao who took action. Shen Qian was conserving his strength so that he could play a miraculous role in the attack and defense of the great fortress. However, even so, Dusk Town was still an unimaginable disaster for the lords of the Council of Skills. Tens of thousands of innocent civilians and thousands of troops were completely buried under the claws of the demon army. Other players in the underground forces were doing the same thing. Goldfinger negotiated with Hammered, and he basically agreed with the strategy, but he had doubts about whether they could go deep into the great fortress. Hammered was the dwarf who knew the situation of the great fortress best. Not to mention the heavy defense facilities in the city, the priest army dispatched by the Rune Ring alone was enough for them to be busy. It was difficult for them to attack by surprise, and the battlefield was different from the previous one concentrated in a few fortresses. This time, there were soldiers everywhere. The circular map of the great fortress was placed in the main tent of Bingzi town. According to the scale of the map, the height of the great fortress was 140 meters and the radius was 6 kilometers. The three city gates are 10 meters high and evenly distributed at 120 degrees apart, with 200,000 health points. 3 mine subways and 3 fortresses are intertwined between the 2 city gates, forming an organic whole. Then there is the spatial structure. The main city has 6 large elevators that can carry thousands of units of resources. The top of the city is a rock dome hollowed out by the mountains, and the bottom is flowing magma. The main streets are distributed in a ring and radial shape. The highest point is Morden's Temple, above the center of the Parliament, and the lowest point is the station of the Flame Dragon Knights. Morden's Temple is stationed with priests of the Rune Ring, who did not participate in the previous battle due to the intervention of the Adventure Lady. The Flame Dragon Knights belong to the Mercenary Guild of the Skills Council and also did not appear due to the mission. Let's look at the defense of the Council of Skills. The dwarf siege stone-breaking crossbow can cause double damage to large units, such as flying dragons and thunder beasts. The magma barrier will produce a magma sea equivalent to level 6 magic damage when the city wall is breached. The Council of Skills has a total of 3 walls, each of which is about 20 meters thick and has 80,000 health points. If it were a normal siege, the underground forces would never be able to capture this fortress city known for its defense. In addition, the city has abundant food reserves, so they cannot achieve the effect through siege. Therefore, players must not be careless about this war that is different from the previous expectations. Ashoka would not have thought that the underground forces left a secret passage when they left the fortress. Then they could avoid the defense barrier and reach the interior of the fortress. If there was no such passage, how could Shen Qian let the dwarves run to their main city so that they could defend it? But even if they could enter the main city, how to face the endless dwarves was a problem. The great fortress had been recruiting soldiers during this period. The level of the recruits was less than 30, which was relatively weak. The total number of troops in the great fortress was still close to 140,000. The 140,000 included 50,000 forces of the great Maurya dynasty. Ashoka did not dare to send out all his troops, fearing that the underground forces would take the opportunity to destroy the guild's territory when he was away. The underground forces took a bluffing approach in the early stage, constantly sending troops to harass the surrounding areas of the great fortress. Normal people would definitely see that they wanted to attack the great fortress, but Ashoka thought more and guessed that the target of the underground city might be the north. He was a little hesitant and it was difficult to judge the exact target of the underground forces. He seemed very hesitant. The players of the Great Maurya dynasty spent a day in a tense atmosphere until the official attack of the underground forces the next day. Ashoka did not expect that the underground forces would dare to attack. It was unbelievable, but they were well prepared and organized the defense very quickly. As soon as the players of the underground forces appeared, they cast a level 9 magic scroll first. Layers of electric nets jumped in a radius of hundreds of meters, hitting nearly hundreds of units to half health, and forcibly pushed to the main street. They divided their troops into three groups: Zushan, Cry, and White Isle. The three major forces have their own ways of playing. For example, Zushan adopts a heroic charge formation to boost morale and concentrate firepower. Cry adopts a square formation to protect the high-level demons with halos in the formation and crush the enemy by numbers. The routes of the three major forces point to the Flame Dragon Knights under the city. The remaining Shenxian is arranged in a defensive formation to face the army of the Great Maurya Dynasty. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 254. The bottom floor of the fortress was filled with smoke, and not far away was the magma. The Flame Dragon Knights stationed there totaled 8,000 people, all of whom were first and second level Ground Dragon Knights and Magma Dragon Knights. They would not be able to resist the siege of underground forces. Ashoka had no confidence in the dwarf's strategy. But the Lord blocked their way, which made Ashoka feel puzzled. Did the Lord want to resist them with 10,000 troops? Although the terrain of the fortress was not easy to deploy a formation, this should not be the reason why the Lord could win. Along the dozens of meters wide street, the Great Maurya Dynasty sent 4 parallel advances, with Snow Eagle Knights above their heads, and they would never make mistakes in reconnaissance again. But compared with the countless experienced commanders in Dusk Town, the Great Maurya Dynasty was relatively ordinary and did not show the strength of a world-class guild. The Great Maurya Dynasty did not give Shenxian too much time to prepare. After a while, the battle began. Hundreds of players shouted, boosting morale. A halo appeared at the feet of powerful units, and their health, defense, attack power, and attributes were improved. Less than 30 meters away from them was the demon army, hundreds of crazy demons, and behind them, the wizard army was in the rear. 4 intersections, fighting at the same time, the battle started from the beginning. This is the opportunity for the dwarves to revenge. Those dungeon masters took the lives of their relatives and compatriots, causing endless destruction and disorder. Iker of Hamd is even more convinced of this. However, Ashoka did not seem to want the dwarves to appear too early. Compared with the players who can be consumed infinitely, Ashoka did have reasons not to use them. The crazy demons and the players of the Great Maurya Dynasty collided with each other and staged an epic battle. Infinite demons were summoned by the evil wizards. The bottom of the fortress became a sea of flesh and blood. Torn pieces of meat and flying blood could be seen everywhere. In front of the groups of crazy demons, no player could resist. The affected buildings collapsed layer by layer, the granite ground was broken into pieces, and the earth was shaking. Red felt that he had to make some achievements today, but the person in front of him was not the Lord, but the woman next to the Lord, night and day, who had destroyed 3 icebreakers in the north with her own hands and was famous in the end of the North Rift. Miss Yao didn't know him, but she used magic to create the rock fortress and the ice barrier, and used the summons of the elemental world to fight. Red is worthy of being the 3rd most powerful person in the Great Maurya Dynasty. He rides on a ground dragon and is assisted by countless rune priests behind him. His command was very fast. Facing the chaotic situation, he issued orders step by step in an orderly manner. The army acted quickly, forming a scattered formation to avoid the range magic of the mage, while outflanking from both wings. In less than a few seconds, his APM is said to have reached 500. Today, when countries around the world have achieved thorough research on the human brain, 500 APM can fully prove the power of a person's reaction, calculation, and logic. The Magic Knights blocked their attack. There were only 200 of them, with a level of 60. From them, a shining semicircular defense barrier could be seen, absorbing the opponent's attack. The Magic Knights stood in neat positions, just like soldiers in the army undergoing Q training. Their intervals were exactly 1 meter, the radius of the defense barrier. Red was a little confused. Could it be that all the players from Dusktown were abnormal? Every player seemed to be a generalist and mastered a variety of skills from single combat, development, negotiation, command, management, etc. Red didn't know that it takes an excellent master to cultivate a game master. Just like Miss Xiao, the game experience gained through forums, websites, and practice will most likely have problems, but if there is a qualified old player to give some advice, a high-level player can be cultivated quickly. However, high-level players generally do not teach apprentices, resulting in a scarcity of players in the world who are truly masters of good apprentices. And Tujukan faced black. The offensive style of the Bloody Cross faced the defensive style of black. It is estimated that there will be a fierce battle. In Shen Xian's home court, the Mad Demon Legion was vulnerable to the divine attack of the Rune Priest. Ashoka quietly counted the number of times the wizards under the Lord drank potions, and found that they drank 3 times in a short half-hour. These 3 times alone cost millions of gold. The Lord was really willing to spend money. Ashoka admired him, but the potion had a cooling time, so when he calculated that the magic of the hand of Ursuline was exhausted, the army charged in large numbers. However, Ashoka found that he underestimated the strength of the Lord. It was ridiculous to compete with him in tactics, just like arm wrestling with adults. The two were never on the same level. Because he found that the Lord could always discover his strategy before him. When you want to release range magic, he always commands the army to evacuate and hide and release energy shields. When you want to shoot, his units always play hit and run. When you want to treat, he always orders the army to rush in large numbers. Competing with such an opponent is undoubtedly a nightmare. But why is the Lord's strength shown on WTP not very strong? Ashoka decided to keep his doubts to himself and decided to suppress the Lord with a hard fight. When he no longer paid attention to formations and strategies, the attack became several times more fierce. He adopted the simplest method of the team specifying the target, and the priest followed the team, advancing layer by layer, and did not compete with the Lord in tactics. Shen Xian withdrew the hand of Ursuline. With their mana exhausted, they summoned about 4,000 demons, consuming the mana of the Rune Priest. The regular army of the territory, the Cross Swordsmen, appeared and then fought hard with the army of the Great Maurya dynasty. The more troops there are, the harder it is to command. Everything becomes unpredictable from tactics to strategy. You can master several tactics, but you can never master several strategies. Both sides suffered large-scale casualties at the same time. The battlefield is like a monster, devouring soldiers wantonly. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 255. The Scarlet Lord's talent slowly turned the earth into a red color filled with a rotten and terrifying atmosphere. The Rune Priest's dispersal technique constantly purified the power that eroded nature and restored the battlefield to its original appearance. The soldiers fought, and it was also a collision of rules. Shen Xian calculated that it would take a long time to completely consume the power of the Great Maurya dynasty, even enough for the players to revive and enter the battlefield. However, the other parts of the underground forces are now encircling the Knights of the Flame Dragon Knights with superior strength, so when he persists, the situation will be clear. Because Ashoka desperately killed his soldiers, he suffered a lot of losses. Even if the two sides consumed at a ratio of 1 to 2, Ashoka's situation was much better than Shen Xian, who could not be rescued. The regular army's cross swordsmen then drank the potion. Their offense and defense were balanced, and they would not die quickly in the face of the enemy's strong killing tactics. As a soldier trained in swordsmanship, being able to sacrifice on the battlefield was their final destination. When the Snow Eagle Knights joined the battlefield, the situation on the battlefield changed slightly. Although the interior space of the fortress was not very open, they could still fight safely against the Snow Eagles, which were only a few meters in size. They used the air strikes that the underground forces feared the most. The Snow Eagle Knights could only play a role here, but not at the base of the Flame Dragon Knights. The Snow Eagles screamed and flapped their snow-white wings in the air. The Dwarf Knights shot out hissing lightning from their hands, bombarding the cross swordsmen, causing 800 to 900 damage. Shen Xian had no air force, except for the timid Shadow Dragon. The situation seemed to have fallen into a passive position all of a sudden. Shen Xian frowned. He really hadn't thought of a way to deal with the Snow Eagles. When he was making strategic arrangements, he didn't consider that they would appear here, because the effect of fighting in the fortress was far less than that in the open area. He could only think temporarily and try to reduce the losses. Now, the battle has lasted for more than 10 minutes. Mistrelin's Ursuline hand rested for a few minutes. After a while, the girl walked up to him and asked, "Sir, when will we retreat?" She knew that no matter how omnipotent Shen Xian was, he could not eliminate them all at the same time. Shen Xian was actually confident that he could block them at the intersection. He said, "Is the Flame Demon Corps ready?" Miss Lin nodded immediately, "Yes, we can set off at any time." Shen Xian looked at the hundreds of strong flame demons not far away. They prayed to Shalok for strength through the sacrificial ceremony. They slowly rose into the air under the enslavement of wizards, but they were not Air Force units and their air combat skills were not proficient enough. In Ashoka's eyes, the Lord's army retreated along the street under the double blow. The dwarf houses almost collapsed instantly because of the fighting spirit and magic. In the face of the astonishing losses, he finally saw the hope of success. He knew that the Flame Dragon Knights could only play a role in fighting on the street. If they were blocked by underground forces, they might be wiped out. Black, Red, Elias. He immediately asked about the battle situation of several routes. Then he discussed with Iker, the Snow Eagle Knights, and the captain of the Fearless Legion behind him, trying to kill a way out of the Lord's army to save the Flame Dragon Knights. The Fearless Legion was ignored again. The slow movement speed of the fortress infantry made it difficult to advance quickly, and it was only suitable for defense. "Master, the Fearless Legion is suitable for defense after all. I think that cooperating with the flank of the Legion and stabilizing the Lord's pace at the same time is what the Fearless should do, not rescue." Ashoka found that the clan coalition led by Hammett was about to arrive. It appeared from the other side of the fortress. No one knew his purpose. Although he wanted to become the speaker, he must not massacre the dwarves, but who knew his true thoughts? In Ashoka's opinion, Hammett was actually the most suitable person to be the speaker, but the camp drew a gap between them and they could never cooperate. The intelligence of the Snow Eagle Knights was delivered to him. The Lord sent out the Fire Demon Legion? Is his target the Snow Eagle Knights? Ashoka asked worriedly, knowing that with the cooperation of the Rune Priest, the Snow Eagle Knights could completely restrain the Fire Demon Legion. This was also the reason why the Lord did not use the wizard's magic skills to conduct mobile warfare. While he was thinking, the leader of the Fearless Legion was still trying to get a chance to fight, saying, "Ashoka, as a dwarf, I hope you can understand our desire to avenge Lord Agron. Fighting is our destiny, and some sacrifices are acceptable." Ashoka had no choice but to allow the Fearless Legion to fight. In fact, in the absence of Agron, no one could command the domestic army. He had no decision-making power and could only dissuade. The Rune Priest quickly gave the Fearless a swift blessing, and they chased in the direction of the underground legion's retreat under the gaze of countless players. Ashoka asked the players of the guild to keep an eye on the Lord's Fire Demon Legion to prevent them from playing any tricks. The speed of the dreadnoughts was relatively slow. When Shen Xian's army was separated from the army on the street, the Snow Eagle Knights had already caused nearly 1,000 casualties to them. This accounted for half of the total casualties. Seeing that the pursuers were the dreadnoughts, Shen Xian felt relieved. At least in a pursued battle, the dreadnoughts were not threatening. He stared at the sky. Hundreds of flame demons were running over him. There was an elevator nearby, with a life value of 50,000. He thought about transporting the Legion to the upper level through the elevator, but because the Air Force could easily destroy the elevator, he divided the army into two places and fell into a passive position. The Legion of Underground Forces then took another road, an ascending street similar to a winding mountain road. After the army appeared on the upper floors of the big fortress, they then rushed to the area with dense buildings. It was not suitable for the snow vultures to fight in the air, and they would be safe. Yanmo arrived faster than them, and Shen Xian used them to do two things. The first was to cover the army, and the second was to block the attack. It took them nearly 10 minutes to reach the top of the big fortress. However, the sacrifice was greater than he imagined, because Ashoka seemed to have thought that he would never use the Balrog to deal with the Snow Vulture Knights, so he ordered the Rune Priest to eliminate the Balrog in the air first. Balrogs with nearly level 70 are a force that cannot be ignored by any party, especially when they appear in the air and are exposed in front of the priest. They are like targets. Shen Xian's army retreated, and the dwarves in the big fortress divided into two groups, one heading towards Shen Xian, and the other heading towards the underground Flame Dragon Knight station. They were delayed for a full 20 minutes, and the Flame Dragon Knights were helpless. In front of Shen Xian, after getting rid of the pursuit of the Snow Vulture Knights, he finally ushered in the attack of the Fearless Legion. The wizards spread to the corners, and the Balrogs destroyed the dwarf dwellings and formed a defense line in the ruins. They did not care about the death of a few dwarf civilians, because from the beginning of the battle to the present, countless civilians had died innocently due to the flames of war. It has to be said that the Fearless are indeed one of the best legions in the Skills Council. Even if the Guardian's level 9 range magic hits the body, it will only cause about 1/5 of the damage of 2000. You can imagine how difficult it is to deal with them when there are 20,000 of them. Wearing the most sophisticated battle armor of the dwarves and covering his whole body with a defense of over 1,500, he was like a tin can. The heavy crossbow used to snipe the knights was ineffective at all. They advanced in formation like tanks, followed by the priests of the rune circle. Healing, buffing, and dispersing, the demon-slaying priest was completing one thing after another. In the face of the perfect configuration, Shen Xian's advantage was only on the battlefield. However, he had never thought about completely wiping out the dwarves. This was a goal that only ambitious players would set. If the dwarves were really that easy to deal with, this race would have disappeared from the world long ago. Shen Xian also discovered that Ashoka actually encouraged the dwarves to destroy the elevators connecting the upper and lower floors. There were 6 elevators in total. If they were to destroy them all and block the intersections, they would really have no way to go up to the sky and no way down to the earth. Shen Xian was a little nervous. It had been a long time since there had been such an interesting battle. Was it a year or two? He still remembered that he had experienced being mercilessly abused again and again when he was training. Could it be that Ashoka has the level to pose a threat to him? Maybe yes, because of the numerical advantage of the Great Maurya dynasty. Countless proposals will always produce a good one, but it will be subject to one kind or another restriction. But he is independent. The reason why the territory does not implement the so-called parliamentary system and democracy is because he believes that he can solve difficulties alone. In the face of personal charm, he is their god in the hearts of hundreds of thousands of residents in Dusktown. No one can replace him, and no one can veto him. This is his advantage. Maybe he should make some changes to influence Ashoka's judgment, because forceful killing is also a tactic. Since it is a tactic, it must have its shortcomings. Maybe forceful killing tactics are versatile and practical, but they will eventually encounter ways to restrain it. After Shen Xian moved the battlefield to a situation that was favorable to him, he began to arrange it layer by layer. While blocking the attack of the Fearless, he also controlled the battlefield in the surrounding areas to prevent their retreat from being affected. At the same time, he tried not to reduce the casualties caused by the Fearless. allowing them to surround themselves and become a special shield for the army. The battle lasted for more than 10 minutes. Ashoka didn't notice it at first and asked the players and NPCs to block the way out from several roads. As long as they blocked it, the fearless ones who fought hard inside could win. After all, the levels of the two sides were not much different. The Dauntless were numerically superior, and the Lord had no way of winning. However, the battle dragged on for a long time. The Flame Dragon Knights were already in chaos. 50,000 underground coalition forces were slaughtering the members of the Knights. The players who rescued also did not gain an advantage. One was too late, and the other was an underground force. 3/4 of the army was there, and they were no match for it. If King Ashoka mobilizes all the troops from the north, they can certainly complete the task of defending. If the underground city turns to attack the north, King Ashoka will definitely suffer a big loss, so the assumption of what if is meaningless. In the final analysis, even if they prepared a good defense and fought a perfect defensive battle, there were too many troops dispatched in the underground city. They were deceived from the beginning and successfully moved the strategic center to the border first, and then they were unaware of the situation. They transferred back unconsciously, so they still lost. Ashoka's brain was a little confused. There were countless pieces of information coming from all directions. He found it difficult to fully digest the information and make the best judgment. He suddenly couldn't think of a way to end the battle quickly. He couldn't use divine scrolls, which would hurt innocent people and cause a loss of reputation. He couldn't use guild power, which would affect the attack of the Fearless Legion. If he had remained calm at this time, Ashoka might be able to find a way to deal with the Lord, but bad news came from the Flame Dragon Knights. All the targets they protected were wiped out, and the long-awaited Underground Legion was freed. The Flame Dragon Knights can be said to be the ultimate embodiment of the ground power of the Council of Arts, but they were strangled in the cradle before they even appeared on the scene. This was a major blow to the Council of Arts, and the Great Maurya dynasty became increasingly passive, even though there was a prey within reach in front of them. Just one chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 256. The Flame Dragon Knights completely disappeared. Shen Xian breathed a sigh of relief, and looked at the terrain of the fortress through the fence, but was thinking about how to leave. The Fearless created a natural defense line for them, which blocked them in some ways. Although the underground forces' legions would turn back soon, he needed to get rid of the encirclement first. Shen Xian repeatedly considered and formulated an escape plan based on the intricate terrain of the fortress. The core of the escape plan was to get rid of the double encirclement of the Fearless Legion and the Great Maurya dynasty, with the focus on the Flame Demon Legion. Shen Xian was determined to sacrifice the Flame Demon. The death of the Flame Demon would not affect the satisfaction of the territory, and they would block the opponent's pursuit. The army moved again, and after a while, they came into close contact with the Fearless, but the dwarves did not lose heart when they heard about the destruction of the Flame Dragon Knights. Instead, they were full of fighting spirit. The first turn cross swordsman faced the second turn fortress infantry and was basically suppressed. Shen Xian first used the fire demon to teleport to the front line to perform a difficult spell coverage, setting up a blazing sea of fire. The sea of fire dealt 387 damage per second, lasted for 300 seconds, and covered an area of hundreds of meters, consuming half of the fire demon's spell-like times. Even if the infantry of the fortress with high HP and high defense passed through, they would still lose more than 5,000 lives, not to mention ordinary units, unless they were protected by the fire-hating aura of the Rune Priest in the rear, otherwise their health would be more than half. What was left for the Fearless was a large number of fire demons. Hundreds of fire demons of nearly level 70 fell from the air in an instant under the divine attack of the rune priest, and disappeared in the sea of fire. The first person Shen Xian encountered in the direction of his escape was not the legion of the Great Maurya dynasty, but the residents inside the fortress. Dozens of fearless civilians rushed to the army. The cross swordsmen in front hesitated a little and did not dare to slaughter civilians at will. The demons did not care about this. They laughed and threw a few abyssal flames. The black fire exploded on the NPCs of more than 10 levels, killing them all instantly without leaving any bones. The army left the battlefield and came to one of the 6 elevators. He met Black, who was shouting at the players to destroy the elevators and not give the Lord a chance to retreat. "Lord, don't think about leaving here today." Black felt deeply regretful and ashamed for letting the Lord go last time. When he met the Lord again, he had the idea of revenge. The players behind him kept swinging axes to destroy. Without the elevator, the army had to take a detour. Black did not believe that the Lord could stop them. Shen Xian still sent out the Flame Demon Legion, using the advantage of flying to pass over Black, who had no long-range army, and seized the elevator, including the bottom of the elevator. The single damage of each consecutive fireball shot by the Flame Demon was more than 1,000, and no one could resist it. The wizard army that Shen Xian sent out next made Black despair. As soon as they appeared in front of them, they released the slow curse. Those casual players of the Great Maurya dynasty with low levels could not move in the face of the NPC's strength. Black was not at a loss. Seeing that the opponent's wizard had amazing control, he quickly asked all the players to stand on the elevator, resolutely started the elevator, and sent the steel platform to the bottom. Because of the field of vision, the wizard could not control the players at once, and the army of the dungeon could only see Black falling down with the few remaining players. The player's attack was 300 damage and took 30 seconds. Although the result was likely that the player would also fall freely and be smashed to pieces, as long as the Lord was blocked, I believe the guild would definitely give satisfactory compensation. Black's timing of dying together was just right. In theory, it could perfectly block their movement, but Black forgot that Shen Xian still had a bloody cross that he had not used. At the moment, the Flame Demon Legion had lost almost all its members, less than 100. After receiving the order, the player legion led by Tujukan quickly moved to the elevator and then jumped with all their strength. They jumped from a height of 20 meters, losing 2,000 to 4,000 health points. After successfully airdropping, they used skills to attack hundreds of players standing on the elevator. Shen Xian considered that Black would definitely relax his vigilance after thinking that they would die together. The airdrop of the Bloody Cross did cause a sudden blow to them. Dozens of players died in less than 10 seconds. The comprehensive quality of the players of the Bloody Cross was higher than that of Black, and there was no suspense in the battle. The elevator was dozens of meters wide and could transport hundreds of units at a time. It cycled every 45 seconds, and it took 20 minutes to transfer all of them. Through offline messages, Shen Xian received the battle situation of the other 3 major forces. Tens of thousands of superior troops chased after the dwarves and eliminated more than 3,000 dwarves in the previous battle. He still needed to hold on for half an hour. There is no technical content in transferring troops through the elevator. Both sides fought desperately near the operating table. The last fire demon was used by Shen Xian to block the attack of the dwarves. The army of the underground forces was successfully transferred. A small guild called Bodhi appeared in front of them, leading an army of about 4,000, but according to previous reconnaissance, they were not found. They may have been hidden in advance or appeared temporarily after obtaining intelligence. It was also a battle. The construction power of the small guild was limited after all, and it was impossible to invest too much money in the game, resulting in the development and construction not keeping up with the high-end players in the first echelon. However, Bodhi had already prepared for the annihilation of the entire army. He had dozens of level 5 and 6 magic scrolls, targeting the demons in the lead. They were extremely restraining and caused huge losses to Shen Xian at the beginning of the battle. Miss Xiao immediately called up the Guardians. The Guardians who were not restrained by the magic took more than 10 minutes to eliminate the army of the Bodhi Guild. Finally, there was no obstacle in front of them. The army of Dusk Town quickly joined the underground city and started a sweep. The remaining nearly 100,000 scattered troops in the fortress collapsed layer by layer under the concentrated attack of the underground forces. The situation was very clear at this point in the battle. In terms of quantity, the underground forces were not as good as the fortress, but in other aspects, the dwarves lost the strongest offensive force, the Flame Dragon Knights, and the remaining more than two-thirds of the force was an ordinary army composed of low-end players. The dwarves cannot fight as blatantly as in the dungeons, so as not to harm innocent people. The dwarves' logistics are also not as strong as those in the dungeons. When their lives are in danger, they can only rely on the priests of the Rune Ring, and the life potions were swept away by the underground forces more than 10 days ago. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 257. The army in the occupied area, Dusk Town, took a half-hour break. At the same time, the three major forces, Zushan, Cry, and White Isle, who were unharmed, continued to advance and quickly occupied the fortress. Just like the previous few days, they began to seize the subordinate cities after capturing the main city. Wars are sometimes extremely similar. It is no different from the battle situation in the previous few days, but the Great Peacock Dynasty fell even worse. It is almost impossible to achieve good results in the world mission. Dusk Town lost 4,000 people, and the elite lost more than half, which was more than 30 million in gold. The loss in the second attack and defense of the fortress was astonishing. The same is true for other forces. The tenacious dwarves are of high level and well equipped. The Flame Dragon Knights also have the legendary Gloves Dragon's Sai, which can release a level 10 magic every 2 hours, which is a terrifying thing for dungeon players. The Great Peacock Dynasty has a large number of people and also possesses the legendary headdress Crown of Stars, which can provide a player with almost unlimited mana recovery, as long as the release interval is considered. After a long battle that lasted for several hours, the players of the Great Maurya Dynasty inside the fortress and the defenses they set up were completely cleared. Finally, after paying a loss of 20,000, the underground forces took control of the fortress for the second time. This time they were more unscrupulous. The resources, items, and equipment that were difficult to take away last time were transported away by truckloads. Due to the contribution of defense and logistics subsidies, Dusk Town got a lot of spoils. The underground forces even boldly looted the dwarf's treasure house and found nearly 10 epic items from it, which were also distributed to players and NPCs. When it came to distributing task rewards, Hammert gave them a lot of rewards, but he felt that the trauma suffered by the fortress was too unacceptable, so the task rewards were slightly reduced. This time the reward can account for the majority of all rewards, so the choice is particularly rich. In the minefield, there are 4 giant copper mines, 5 giant iron mines, 1 giant mithril mine, 1 giant adamantium mine, and 1 giant gem mine. There are also things that have never appeared before, such as 2 giant wolf ranches, which can provide tens of thousands of units of high-quality food every day, which improves the satisfaction of the territory and the probability of elites appearing. 1. Holy Thornwood Forest, which produces rare materials for furniture and equipment, and the items produced are luxury goods that the upper-class nobles compete to buy. There are 20 giant resource rewards alone. Another part is allocated to the surrounding forces participating in the mission. They are allocated a lot of large and medium-sized mines, which is considered to be a lot of benefits in the north. Zushan directly robbed 5 giant iron mines, which are not valuable, but can quickly mine a large amount of ore for the armament of the territory. The 5 giant mines operate at the same time and can produce hundreds of excellent level armors a day. It is an excellent choice for Zushan with a large population. White Isle took the Holy Thornwood Forest. The Holy Thornwood can make luxurious and durable room decorations, which is an indispensable thing in a kingdom capital in the later period and can earn huge profits. Territories have their own characteristics, resources, and environmental restrictions, and often cannot be all-encompassing. Unless it is a vast country, it must make some choices. Several mines are not far from Dusktown. It is a good idea to choose them, but is it really worth it? Shen Xian hesitated. Even if they are mined and the territory has enough power to produce and manufacture, can they be sold successfully? The later the competition, the more intense it is. The country is not a development-based management game. There is a limit to technology. It will not allow players like some players in the Empire series to progress from the Stone Age to the Cosmic Age. Therefore, players need to consider complementarity more, rather than taking the lead. The reason for Shen Xian's hesitation is that he feels that the current market developed by Dusktown is not enough to cope with the production of Dusktown. The supply exceeds the demand, resulting in a decline in profits, and in fact, the imagined benefits cannot be achieved. Considering the situation in Dusktown, he finally chose a flying dragon nest, which can be said to be the first flying dragon nest of a player in the game. There are thousands of flying dragons living in it. Once domesticated, the territory can have an additional tool for fast transportation. The load of a flying dragon is generally over 1,000, twice that of a ground dragon, and its movement speed is 3 times that of a terrain dragon. Considering that it is not affected by the terrain, using flying dragons to transport goods can almost increase the efficiency of trade by 5 times. In terms of military use, flying dragons can be tamed into dragon cavalry, which is similar to the dragon cavalry of the Peak Fortress. It is a medium-range soldier comparable to the Snow Eagle Knight. It can attack with dragon spears and can be transferred to siege units that throw boulders. When Shen Xian assisted Sheep in seizing the position of the patriarch of the Vank family, he sent flying dragons. They were recruited from the Talinger fortress. He wanted to use them to test the effects of these flying siege weapons, but due to the number of flying dragons, he did not form a complete flying dragon army. Now, there are enough flying dragons in the flying dragon nest to realize his idea, but the flying dragon nest is one of the best in the value of the task reward, and there is no other reward after choosing it. But Shen Xian felt that it was necessary to obtain it. First, it could speed up trade, and second, it could expand the vast market, making Dusktown a must-go place for merchants traveling from north to south, highlighting the environmental advantages of Dusktown. After all, the underground is not the home of the Air Force. Unless it is a 6th-stage territory like the Peak Fortress that has the power to tear apart time and space, otherwise the Air Force is meaningless. After Shen Xian took the dragon's nest as a reward, he then considered food. The dragon cavalry's food consumption is 80, and 80,000 units of food are needed a day. He chose a large wild boar ranch to make up for the food consumption brought by the dragon. After dozens of minutes, the task rewards were distributed. After the underground forces took away the material seized from the fortress, they could then evacuate. After this battle, except for the North Rift Mountains, which remained silent in the snow and ice for thousands of years, the war broke out in the Council of Arts, and the surrounding players would occasionally make some amazing moves, capturing the dwarf villages and looting the dwarf craftsmen. The Great Maurya dynasty was in constant civil strife. The players who had surrendered and now felt that there was an opportunity to take advantage of the decline in the territory rose up and responded. The underground forces were still making waves in the north, and no army could stop them. The satisfaction of the kingdom and the population plummeted. In a few days, which is a month in the game, the population of the Council of Arts dropped by 300,000. Most of them were affected by the war and were homeless, and had to leave their homes where they had lived for hundreds of years. The end of the dwarves seemed to be coming. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lau Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 258. The Great Maurya dynasty was defeated, and the situation took a sharp turn for the worse. Although the terrain in the north was complex, the strategic depth was insufficient to resist the underground forces' elusiveness. Moreover, there was the northern map left by Xiao Yan. Facing the continuous harassment, the Great Maurya dynasty had almost no chance to breathe. The Ganges town and Bharata town in the territory were successively destroyed. The prosperous towns with a population of more than 10,000 degenerated into villages with a population of less than a few hundred in just a few days. Then there was the riot, wanting to overthrow the rule and replace it. Even if it was an impossible task, as the saying goes, those who are ignorant are fearless, and the players are still enthusiastic. After 10 days of consumption, the underground forces wiped out 40,000 troops. At the same time, Hammered quietly organized his forces, promoted and encouraged in the big fortress, and rekindled hope in the silent hearts of the dwarves. Time flies. On December 23, the world mission entered the late stage. The population of the Art Council shrank by 10% and the territory shrank by 10% due to natural disasters and man-made disasters. The dwarf history called this year a year of despair. On this day, they ushered in the counter-attack of Hammered. When the underground forces tried to capture the fortress for the third time, they defeated the underground coalition and successfully forced them to retreat. For Shen Xian, the next task became as rigid as a routine, and there was no challenge. He began to withdraw his troops. In terms of mission rewards, the mission rewards of Dusk Town can only account for 1/6 of the total, but nearly half of the series of spoils when the fortress was captured went to the town, and Dusk Town's harvest was extraordinary. In summary, the territory can currently mass-produce complete sets of equipment at levels 50 and 60. The second-level professional suit usually includes 9 parts: helmet, chest armor, leg armor, guard, hand guard, wrist guard, belt, shoulder armor, and weapon, with a cost of 12,000 and 33,000 gold, and the market prospect is excellent. It can copy magic scrolls up to level 7. The average price of a level 7 magic scroll is about 5,000 gold. It is a high-selling product favored by even adventurers. And it produces powerful potions for level 60 units, including life recovery, magic, increased attack power, defense, fire resistance, etc., which can restore the combat effectiveness of soldiers in a short time. In general, the skills of the production units in Dusk Town are about 2 levels ahead of the surrounding forces. Because of the war, the population loss is huge, but the satisfaction has not fallen. Unlike modern society, as long as you can continue to win and divert conflicts, the sacrifice of soldiers can be completely ignored. Many projects have been temporarily shelved, except for the 2 magic towers in the territory, which now occupy the ground and dome of Dusk Hill and become the iconic buildings of Dusk Town. Relying on the Mage Tower, the upgrade is very fast. Shen Xian has just reached level 80 in the past few days, but Miss Xiao, who has not experienced the Hell Trial, has also reached level 80. The Mage Tower can provide hundreds of thousands of experience upgrades every 2 hours, and level 79 to level 80 is 11 million experience. If it is slow, it will take up to 3 days to upgrade 1 level. Shen Xian has become much more relaxed. Unimportant development tasks can be handed over to his subordinates. He began to gradually pursue stronger power. The lifespan of the characters created by players is limited. For humans, 100 years is high enough. In reality, it is 100 months. Excluding the 20 years old when he was born, his character actually has only 80 months to live. Dwarves are 300 months, elves are 800 months, and dragons are 2000 months. Some players who choose ogres and goblins are even shorter, only a few dozen months, but the experience acquisition rate will be higher than that of dwarves and elves, and each has its own advantages. After the player completes the third transformation, the lifespan can be extended by about half, and humans can reach 150 years. They are not afraid of some undead spells that absorb lifespan, and if the player is deified, the lifespan will be increased to infinity. The player's territory can be upgraded to the 6th stage, that is, the capital stage. The population of 1 million is almost the limit. It is restricted by the environment, technology, etc. unless it is in the endless abyss and the 9 hells, or the city built by evil forces. It carries tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of people, otherwise the city will never change more. The 7th stage is the transcendence stage. The form of the city will appear in a very special appearance. Even the mage tower has to go through this process. The 7th stage is the ultimate of the territory, but it requires strength. To reach the 7th stage, you must have a demigod player of level 150. So, if ordinary players do not need to pursue levels, but as Shen Xian who pursues stronger, he must practice to level 150. Levels above 150 belong to the world of gods and blasphemers. The deification can directly cross the level barrier. Even if a player of dozens of levels is deified, as long as he succeeds and ignites the fire of divinity, he can reach level 151. The possibility of a player of dozens of levels being deified is close to zero. The limit of normal levels is level 150. Several special races such as devils, demons, and liches can continue to upgrade at level 150. Every level increase, the increase in attributes is extremely terrifying. The attributes of players at level 150 are exactly the same as those of hero-level NPCs at level 150, and they will have millions of health points. However, after deification, they can grow to more than 10 million and become god-level units. Other races will be reflected in a gradual form. Therefore, deification is the ultimate goal that players dream of. Every time a god is born on the continent, endless killing will be set off, and even those hidden forces will surface. However, since Shen Xian has surrendered to the darkness, it is impossible for him to be deified again. The corrupt power of hell can erode the god's body, power, and godhood. Everything related to the god. This is too far away. Shen Xian and Miss Yao are standing in the hinterland of the North Rift Mountains. Behind them are Luna, Tujukan and other characters with the highest territory levels. The North Rift Mountains are covered with heavy snow. Looking back at the road they came from, the clear footprints are now buried by the snow. In front of them is a black cave several dozen meters high. There are gusts of wind coming from the cave, and nearly 1,000 flying dragons live inside. According to intelligence, the length of the flying dragon nest is no less than tens of kilometers. The flying dragon king inside is level 110, and the remaining adult flying dragons are around level 60. If you only give an address coordinate of the flying dragon nest, of course it is not so valuable. What is different from the past is that it is inhabited by the relatively docile crystal flying dragon among the flying dragons. As long as you can subdue the flying dragon king, you can control the entire tribe. Shen Xian was accompanied by a proficient and wild ogre shaman, a member of the ogre house, who was used to communicate with the Dragon King. The rest were guardians and members of the Ebon Blade Knights. The Hand of Ursuline and the Bloody Cross were absent due to losses in the war. After preparing potions, scrolls, and the priest applying buffs, the battle began. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Buletin Lao Buletin Si Buletin Me. Chapter 259. Luna, who was the most agile and the highest level, flashed into the cave and led out the Dragon King. After a while, the fierce and powerful Dragon King flew out. The snow-white skin was covered with mottled patterns, and the hairy body was covered with crystals. This was a subspecies of dragons that had been taking crystals for a long time. It also had dragon blood, but its bloodline was relatively weak. The ogre shaman shouted loudly, "Submit!" The Dragon King screamed loudly, flapped his wings, and exhaled dust to show his disobedience. The dust could petrify and cause the negative state of confinement. The Black Blade Knights in front had just appeared, and dozens of knights were petrified and then slapped away in an instant. The support of the Guardians came soon, and heavy magic was applied to the Dragon King. The dozens of meters-long rock spears pierced the Dragon King's solid defense. Luna then jumped on it and attacked its neck with all her might. Each attack was like thunder, as if a small mountain was pressing down. The Flying Dragon King, which was pressed down by the huge force, shook violently and rubbed against the cave, trying to shake Luna off. Shen Xian, Tujukan's melee profession, began to get close. The flying dragon was pressed down from the air to a height of 5 meters. Shen Xian did not use a shield, but a sunset gun. The damage to him by the 110 level Flying Dragon King was about 5,000, which was not a big threat. Before the attack, he used the Innocent first. The world mission was not completely completed, and Hammered had no intention of taking it back. After a round of attacks, the Flying Dragon King with a health value of 940,000 lost 10% of its health, but more than 40 or 50 knights became half-blooded and were in a critical state. The AI of any unit that reaches level 90 will never be low. After the Dragon King beat the knights of the Black Blade Knights to half health, he immediately prepared to kill them all. If dozens of knights died at the same time, the task of attacking the dragon's nest would be a heavy loss. Shen Xian would certainly not allow it to happen. He quickly blocked its route and used skills to attack to hinder the dragon. Seeing this scene, the Terror Knights had been on the battlefield for a long time. They immediately evacuated one by one with red blood, and the speed was very fast. This time was enough for the Guardian to complete a level 9 single magic, with a damage of about 50,000. The yellow lightning instantly hit the Dragon King hard. Progress 80%. Shen Xian took a breath. So far, the army has completed their mission. Then it is the power that the high-level players should contribute. The Innocent loaded the soul arrow and shot it for the second time. The Dragon King is level 108. Tujukan's agile body flexibly wandered under the feet of the dragon. Unless it was the dust breath, he would never be hit. The fierce Abyss Demon then entangled with the Dragon King. Mistrelan summoned the Abyss Demon at level 70. Under normal circumstances, it would be torn into pieces if it lasted for more than 10 seconds. But Mistrelan controlled them for more than 30 seconds, buying enough time. The Dragon King's health value dropped to 50% in a blink of an eye under the bombardment of Miss Xiao and Fulei. Tujukan slashed at the root of the dragon's wings like a madman. 4 or 5 huge 1,500 damage jumped out, obviously hitting the vital point. There was only a muffled sound of clicking, and the Dragon King fell rapidly. The Dragon King who landed shook his body and finally surrendered. Even Shen Xian did not expect that they would succeed when the health value was 50%. He was a little worried about whether it could take on the duties of the clan leader with broken wings, but through the 2 knowledgeable mages, he learned that the crystal dragons were quite docile, and they would never be replaced unless the previous Dragon King died of old age. Easily, they recovered a level 110 Dragon King. Under the order of the Dragon King, the 1,000 dragons hiding deep in the dragon's nest chose to surrender. Even if they could fight them together, beasts were still beasts and would never think so much. Dragons appeared in batches in the village at the bottom of the North Rift Mountains. The blacksmiths equipped them with saddles for riding and armor for carrying goods to protect themselves. Most importantly, every dragon was marked, even the newly born dragons. The passage connecting Dusktown and the temporary village in the North Rift Mountains is undergoing a project, expansion. The tamed dragons are not used for transportation on the surface world, but underground. The size of the dragons cannot cross the narrow passage of 5 meters in width, so they have to continue to send labor to build, while transferring a group of young dragons with a load of about 400. When the dragons arrive in Dusktown, they must be provided with food by Dusktown. It is not impossible to hunt for food in the wild, but it will affect the normal trade order. After the first batch of 50 flying dragons were put into foreign trade and resource transportation, the territory's trade volume increased by 2 levels in a few days. Everyone likes to get goods quickly. In a background similar to the Middle Ages, the delivery of goods is not fast. If you grasp a small business opportunity well, you can make a lot of money. Shen Xian, who is developing rapidly in business, hurriedly studied the 6th level production science, met the task conditions of plain trade, and started the next task. In the center of the town, Shen Xian and Fulei sat face to face. Fulei, who did not belong to this world, is now level 90. She is wearing a feather coat woven with flames, but the flames on her body will not affect the surrounding tables and chairs. She pursed her lips gently, very beautiful. Although the legendary elemental race has no gender, the legend is originally half true and half false, and no one can tell. The strongest person in another plane, her incarnation seems very low-key. It must be said that Fulei is an approachable little girl. But it can't conceal the powerful power in her body. She fully masters the core laws of the fire element plane and dominates everything in the plane. It's just that the fire element plane is a lower plane than the main material plane, so Wendy is already at the top of the list at level 130. Shen Xian once thought about what the ultimate goal of plane trade is. Satisfying Wendy's personal desires, or a pure task of development and growth. Mastering a space channel and being able to walk freely between two worlds is what plane merchants rely on for survival. The profits of the goods they sell are often 5 times, 10 times, or even 100 times. They only need to concentrate on developing the market without worrying about goods and competitors. But now it involves the development of the territory, and he feels that it has deviated from the essence of trade. However, Fulei finally solved the mystery, pointing to a place on the map and saying, "The next task is to return to where we have been." Online game Dungeon Master. Author, Bulletin Lao Bulletin Si Bulletin Me. Chapter 260. Fleur pointed to a point on the Dusk Hills map not far from Dusktown and said, "The next target of the plane trade is there." Her fingers fell on the pattern marked with a 6-pointed star, which symbolized the place left by Phillips, one of the elemental gates. Now because the elemental gate tore apart space and went to an alien plane, it is still an uninhabited area so far. Space. Shen Xian suddenly understood. Could it be that Fleur's ultimate goal is to develop the ruins of the elemental gate? He thought for a moment and felt that it was not impossible. The disappearing elemental gate left them with an open space of dozens of kilometers in radius, enough to accommodate a city with a population of 1 million, plus the remaining defensive barriers, Dreamland Square, and summoning barriers. The defense of the new city is almost nothing to worry about. But, do we need to hide the secret? You must know that if the Gate of Elements is known to other players, it will inevitably cause special events. Now it is blocked by earth and rocks. Except for Miss Aaron, Miss Xiao, and the others sometimes appear there. Normally, there will never be anyone else to avoid being caught. Suspect. You can go ahead and arrange the streets, functional areas, centers, and defense facilities. As for whether they will be discovered, there is actually no possibility. Fleur patted her chest and assured, and then explained, when Phillips left, we put the mage tower detects the internal transfer of magic power fluctuations, so as long as we slightly conceal those ancient patterns and buildings that may arouse suspicion, basically no one will notice. I didn't let you develop there before because Dusktown's strength was not enough. If you act rashly, it would attract the prying eyes of outsiders. Now that Dusktown has the power to protect itself, there is no need to worry. In addition, I will call Springer over. It only takes a little time to repair some of the buildings and it could be as strong as the Great Fortress. To develop the elemental gate, it is necessary to upgrade the city center. Shenxian checked the conditions for upgrading: population 30,000, satisfaction 70 or 30, prosperity 40, civilization 40, and miracle 40. Compared with the town center, it is an improvement. For Dusk the town is more difficult because the food problem has not yet been solved. Currently, the surrounding areas are divided up by players, and trade must be restricted by other players. Shenxian is unwilling to do so, so he wants to use other means. He opened the map. The space left by the Gate of Elements is a circular space with a radius of 15 kilometers. It is surrounded by the Hall of Illusions, damaged, the Hall of Arcana, damaged, the Mechanical Hall, damaged, the Dream Square, the Summoning Barrier, and the Defense Barrier. In the boundary, the Sharp Stone Barrier, damaged, consists of 7 buildings, occupying a large space. By incorporating Dream Square, Summoning Barrier, and Defense Barrier into the territory's ruling area, the territory's prosperity, civilization, and miracles can be increased by 1, 2, and 5 points respectively. Only by upgrading to the city center can buildings be brought under control. The two are contradictory. However, you can first build camps, gathering centers, and village centers at the Gate of Elements, and then annex Dusk Town as a subordinate town, and the population will be calculated uniformly. As for prosperity, civilization, and miracles, they are overall and have nothing to do with the main territory. However, when it comes to city planning, Shenxian needs to find some experts. Today's cities are too complex. The initial project includes tens of thousands of buildings, and after completion, the number will reach hundreds of thousands. As the saying goes, a wise man will make mistakes after every consideration, and Shenxian is not an infallible computer. He called Miss Xiao. Compared with Tu Jukan and Ant Bing, Miss Xiao was relatively familiar with this field. In just a few seconds, Miss Xiao appeared with the brilliance of the teleportation technique. She was wearing a luxurious robe that only a great mage would wear. The whole thing felt as smooth as metal, with a special moon-shaped pattern painted on it, but it was slightly open on the chest, showing that she had feminine features and several ancient magic books in her hands, obviously studying them carefully. His face turned slightly red and he said, "What's the matter?" Shenxian immediately unfolded the map and told her the whole story. She nodded as if understanding. "I see, I'll think about it first." The central location must be the city center, which also includes the most important buildings such as the Chamber of Commerce, the Mercenary Guild, the court, the temple, and the square. Then it can be divided into slum area and aristocratic area. The slum area is allocated in the east of the city, and the aristocratic area is allocated in the west of the city. The adjacency of the two will lead to a decrease in satisfaction. The slum area includes 10,000 houses, housing a population of 100,000, and the aristocratic area includes 100 mansions, equipped with gardens and fountains. The north of the city is the military area, and the south is the manufacturing area. The two separate the slum area and the aristocratic area. Each city district is also a city, which contains the city's constituent elements, such as guilds and temples. The difference from the city center is that they are subordinates. After dividing the functional areas, they first drew radial roads starting from the city center, 5 times as wide, and then a circular road nearly 100 meters apart connecting the radial roads, 3 times as wide. Started laying out sewers and mazes again. Then there are the infrastructure, such as tax collection stations, guilds, and temples. The number is small and you just need to be careful not to overlap. After the layout, they left the spaces that would be used later, and finally filled in the blanks with warehouses, wells, houses, and shops, and a preliminary planning drawing was drawn. Finally, you need to calculate the budget and time to complete all the projects. Tens of millions of resource consumption is inevitable. The time is at least 1 month, which is 1 year in the game. I'm going to find a few people to review it, Ms. Yao said. Like laying out a big city, they usually open the development simulator for actual simulation to prevent accidents during the construction process. Shen Xian stopped her. Wait a minute. There are still a few tasks to repair the building. Let's take a look first to avoid running out of space. As she spoke, a task list appeared in front of Miss Yao. Task: repairing the stone wall requires 500,000 stones, 300,000 gold, 100 mages above level 50, and 12 hours. The stone wall provides an additional 20% health and defense for the territory walls and mazes, and provides a level 6 rock spear spell counter, which is an auxiliary building of the defensive barrier. Task: repairing the Hall of Illusion requires 100,000 magic crystals, 2 million gold, 500 goblin craftsmen, and 100 mages, and 72 hours. The Hall of Illusion provides 2 functions to the territory. The first is to open the illusion function of the defensive barrier. When a hostile unit approaches the defensive barrier within 100 meters, it will be subjected to a level 7 dream spell, which prevents the unit from approaching the defensive barrier within 30 to 150 seconds. The second is to open the mysterious faction magic of the Mage Tower, providing the possibility for the mage to change his job to an illusionist. Mission: repairing the Hall of Arcane requires 450,000 magic crystals, 5 million gold, 1,000 goblin craftsmen, 500 mages, and 150 hours. The Hall of Arcane is the core building outside the Elemental Gate, which controls the defensive barrier and alchemical creatures. In addition, it can provide all units in the territory with an aura of 10% magic resistance, with a range of 10 kilometers. Mission: repairing the Mechanical Hall requires 100,000 magic crystals, 2 million gold, 500 goblin craftsmen, 100 mages, and 72 hours. The Mechanical Hall increases the skill of the alchemy laboratory to manufacture alchemical creatures by 1 level, and opens the corresponding alchemical creature manufacturing drawings. After reading it, Miss Yao hurriedly left with the drawings. Shen Xian touched his head, looked at Fulei and said, "Then solve the problem of food."